As I will let them in. Okay, Pavel, please.
Okay, hello everybody. As you can see, I'm Pavel Kapica, as it's written, from Neo Quartet and from Stowarzyszenie NeoArte, organizer of the NeoArte Synthesizer Festival. I hope some of you had opportunity to be a guest of our festival and to party in concerts this year or some years ago. But that's why we are here, because actually today's online workshop is kind of a part of our festival, but 1 month later. So we still have like the festival is longer this year, so you have the opportunity to meet a great Belgian composer, Stefan Prins, who was a composer in residence at the last edition of our festival, with a fantastic concert in Patio ASP with Orchestra Muzyki Nowej. That was a great concert. I remember it very, very well, and the sounds I still have in my mind. So Stefan Prins is a very famous composer, famous in Europe and in the world. So that's a great opportunity that you have him today for you to listen, to watch, and to ask at the end, I hope, some questions. Stefan, if I can say, is a great specialist of electronic music also. So he will also say everything probably about that during the workshops. And he's a professor of composition in Dresden Music Academy or University of Music. I'm not sure, but
University of Music, yes.
University of Music, yes. So now I give the voice to Stefan, and I hope you all enjoy the meeting. So see you later.
Great. Thanks so much, Pavel, for this opportunity to talk with the younger generation of composers as well. I think it's a really fantastic part of your festival, that it's not just the concerts, but you also organize this workshop. And yeah, I hope all the students are very grateful to you for this opportunity. And thanks also, Camille, for hosting this session. I would like to ask, I'm glad there are some people here in the room, but it's a bit sad to only see names on my screen. I would love to see your faces too. Would you mind turning on your, yes, thanks. Hi, Maria. Great. Would the others also mind turning on their cameras? That's gonna make the talk so much nicer and probably a bit more interactive and better.
Or pokażcie się, yeah. Proszę, chociaż na chwilkę. We have some info on chat.
Dzień dobry, Anna, Sandra, Malvina, Anna. There are several Annas I see. Would you mind putting on your camera? It's going to be so much nicer. It's a bit sad if I only see names on the screen. I'm glad Maria is already present there. Hi.
Hello, I'm so sorry. Can you give me 30 minutes and I will try to be as active as I can be.
Sure. No, you don't have to be active. It's just nicer to see a face, and I love seeing your child's face. Actually,
Yes.
right now, my
Yeah,
my own
sorry.
son, I have a son of 2 years and 4 months,
Okay.
and he's been sick all week. So we've been
Together.
my partner and me. She's also Polish, and we've been also. I know the situation. We've also been having our child everywhere these days. So
Yeah,
really, don't
yeah,
worry.
sorry, thank you.
Hi, Anna. Nice to meet you. Is Malvina there, or is it just a ghost name?
Yes, I am, but I'm shy and I don't really want
No,
to
please
turn
don't be
on
shy.
my
I'm
camera.
also shy, but it's nicer if we can just look, at least see your face. You don't have to talk. It's just, if I would be in the classroom, I would also see you. So, otherwise it's not so nice to just talk to empty screens. Great. Thanks, Malvina. Great seeing you. Okay. Good. Yes. I hope it's fine that I do this in English. My Polish is not so good. I know a few words that I'm learning now that my son, my partner is speaking to my son in Polish. But this is children's vocabulary, so I don't think I can do a presentation with that. So I will be talking in English. If there are questions, you can always interrupt me. Just I should normally see your faces on the windows while I give my presentation. But if you notice that I'm not giving you the possibility to ask, just start talking and I will stop. It might be that I just don't see it. So no worries about that. And since we are only a few people, I guess we can make it very interactive. Right. I was planning to, and I am still planning to talk about my music from the concept of hybrid bodies and hybrid spaces. It's kind of a general interest I have that shines through many of the pieces that I compose. But before doing so, I just wanted to ask, and just be honest, it's not, I'm not checking on you or anything, but I just wanted to know who of you has been in the concerts of the festival where my piece Third Space was performed a month ago in Festival of Pavel. Nobody? Okay, that's just to know, because I wanted to talk about this. I thought if people went to the concert, I can talk a bit more about this piece. But since nobody has gone to that concert, perhaps I can.
Sorry, I was there.
Ah, you were there. Hi, Anna.
Yes. Hi.
Okay. I will talk a little bit about that piece as well then. So let me start. Yeah, I was also planning to not talk too much. I will try to talk for, we have until 5, am I correct? Camille, is that correct? Yes. Okay, so I will try to stop at 4:30 and then there is still time for questions. So I will share my screen now. And you should all see hybrid bodies and hybrid spaces. Do you see this? Just for me to know if it works or not.
Yes, it's okay. It works.
Yes, fantastic. Great, here we go. So, question to you first. You're all composers, or you also perform, or you are both performers and composers?
I think most of us are composers, but we have also Mrs. Anna Domska, which is a theory student, right?
Yeah, theory and violin.
And the violin, right, of course.
Okay, great, good. Well, I guess anybody who plays an instrument probably knows the feeling that this instrument has somehow become a part of your body, especially if you practice a lot if you really want it to be something you communicate with. So in a sense, a musician, a performer is already a hybridized body. It's already a body that has an extension. And this, for example, is nothing more than a very hybridized performer. This person has, as you can see, a lot of instruments built around him. So the body is already somehow technologically expanded in a very funny way, of course. This is another more high-tech example. This is a prosthetic arm, which is directly connected onto the nervous system of this person. So it's not an arm that is immobile and that can't move, but it can actually move in a very similar way as we move our own natural body parts from flesh and bones by just activating the neural zones that communicate with these body parts. This is something that is not so uncommon anymore these days. The first of these were made in around 2013. This is an artist, Stelarc. I'm not sure if you know him. He's a Cypriotic artist, a very interesting person who has been developing arts, performances, installations for a long time now, and with a very high focus on the newest technologies and especially communication technologies. And here in this performance, which is called Remixed Rewired from 2015, the idea was that he would dissociate all his senses. For example, you can probably see that he has some weird kind of goggles on, eyeglasses and headphones. So these eyeglasses this is a bit before virtual reality or augmented reality became mainstream, but it's a similar idea. So in the glasses, he actually sees a video projection from a webcam somewhere in London. On the headphones, you can hear sounds live recorded and live streamed by a microphone in New York. And then he has this arm, as you can see, which is it's an exoskeleton, and it is completely controlled remotely over the internet by somebody. I think this was in Australia. So this person who is his body is in a gallery, but his senses, what he hears, what he sees, and how his arm moves, comes from all different places around the world. So this idea of dislocation, hybridizing a body, is really part of his art. And perhaps some of you know this. Did any of you ever play Guitar Hero? Is there anybody here who has played Guitar Hero? No. There's no shame in admitting you played Guitar Hero. Well, yeah, so this is Guitar Hero, a computer game that was very popular a while ago. I'm not sure if it's still very popular, but the idea of it is also very much related to this hybridization of the body. So it looks fairly normal on first glance. You see a person with a kind of guitar. It's not a real guitar with strings, but it has buttons on the neck, and the buttons coincide with positions. And on the screen, so they're playing a computer game. On the screen, they see dots that are almost like cars approaching you, and when they enter the line, you have to push the button that coincides with these dots. So it's actually a fun game to learn a score, and it's a special kind of score where you don't have rhythmical values the way we know it, but it's represented in a different way. What's fascinated me about this, though, is that you actually are controlling an avatar with this. So you have the dots that you can see on the screen, but then behind this, you see a person with a guitar. And actually, when you play the game, you can select which guitar player you want to be. And then the guitar player plays synchronously with you what you're doing on the guitar in the virtual space. So your body's, again, it's hybridized like a normal musician, but there is an extra layer to it. You are also controlling an avatar. And I thought this was really interesting. In 2010, I was asked by a Belgian pianist, Friedrich Kroene, to write a composition for him for a recital he was going to do, where he would use, he wanted to make some strange kind of recital with a lot of different media. And he told me I could use any medium I wanted. And I was back then thinking, okay, piece for piano, 2011, what can I do? Because when you think of piano, yeah, the piece is going to be called Piano Hero 1. When you think of a piano, you probably think of this or something like this. This is the image we have. A piano is like this black monster, and it's played by a white old man with a white beard. That's kind of the stereotypical aura that is around the piano, mainly playing romantic music, perhaps classical music. But it really is an instrument that has not been very much developed since the beginning of the 20th century. It's been basically the same instrument since then. And well, we all know you live in Poland, which has one of the most important piano competitions worldwide. And you have one of the most important piano composers, probably of the 19th century. So you know what the aura is of the piano. And when I was asked to write this piece in 2010, of course, I didn't want to write a piano piece that brings back the aura of the 19th century, but I wanted to write something that is more talking about the world of today, the world of 2010. So I was thinking, what can I do? How can I bring this piano more into today's world? I thought, okay, perhaps I can cut the piano in two. I can say the piano is actually a combination of an interface. The interface is the keyboard. And on the other hand, I have the part of the piano where the sound is being produced, or where the sound comes from. That's the resonating part of the piano. If I take these two apart, I could say I replace the interface by an electric piano, as you can see here. I connect this to a computer, and I would replace the part of the piano that is where the sound is generated. And I replace this by a virtual resonator, let's say. So a projection of the inside of the piano. And of course, I also need a loudspeaker for the sound to come out there. And then I would let that part, the virtual part of the piano, be played by a virtual pianist. Excuse me. And since we are living in a world that has been, or that is being monitored so much, I also wanted to bring in this element of monitoring, of surveillance into the piece, and added a webcam to the piece. You'll see in the composition what that does also to it. My next step was to go to the studio of the pianist who commissioned the piece, Friedrich Kroene. Let me pause this for us. Oh, no, it's not pausing. Can I pause this? Yes. You can see me also sitting there about 13 years ago. I was still young and beautiful. And you can also see a lot of cameras and microphones. For example, there are microphones here. You can see my mouse, right? When I'm moving over the screen. Yeah, perfect. So there are microphones here. There is a camera here. If you can see it, it's a very small camera mounted onto the piano. And this piano, it's actually the inside of an upright piano. So the piano was taken apart. It was an old piano that was basically unplayable. And Frederick took that part out and then put it on the back. And you can see the strings there. He plays on it directly. And what he holds in his hands here, not sure if you can see it well, are the black keys of the piano. So this is the black key, and then this is the part that normally goes inside the piano. You can also see it here in his other hand. It's part of the hammer mechanism here. And so in Piano Hero, Piano Hero 1, the performer only uses parts of the piano to play inside the piano. So we have the camera here, which is a typical surveillance camera. You have the camera that you see the perspective of this entire image, which was also a camera that was in the corner. We hang in the corner of his studio. There is a camera here, a frontal camera. And then there is a camera here on top filming from above. So we made recordings of Frederick improvising on the piano. I directed the improvisations a little bit, and we had a lot of material that we recorded with all those different camera perspectives. And let me first give you a very short idea of the sounds. I hope you'll hear it. It's going to be quite soft. If you don't hear it, just let me know. Then probably I did something wrong. Oh, here we go. You hear something? Yeah, great. Yeah, just a very short example. You'll hear more of this in the piece. Friedrich Krune, as I mentioned before. Let me quickly check if I have, no, okay. Hold on, I want to show you quickly, yes, an extract from the score so you have an idea of how this looks like. So the piece, so what I did was we had all these recordings. I listened to all these recordings. When I asked Frederick to improvise and when I kind of directed him, I still didn't have an idea which structure the piece would be or how to organize my material. And that's very often how I work. So I first gather sound material, and then once I have that material, I'll let that material more or less decide what the structure will be of the piece. So I had all that material. I started, well, first of all, I started to categorize it. I put it in similar categories, for example, hammered sounds, scratched sounds, resonant sounds, sounds made with the hands. Yeah, there were more categories. Then in those categories, I started to cut those sounds in short or longer samples. And then I used Max MSP. I don't know. Do you all know Max, the software program, the software for for audio processing and video processing? Could you give me a thumbs up if you know it? Great. Okay. So I used Max to map those samples, and those are always audio video samples together. So you always hear the sound that comes with what you see. I mapped those on 3 octaves here, the keys from F2 to E5. Each key is a different video sample. And then I made the possibility with the upper 2 octaves of the keyboard to transpose those samples. So I could play a sample with my left hand, and then with my right hand, I can say I played faster or slower. And a part of this transposition is chromatic. So the speeds, if you play one sample and you go one half tone up on the keyboard, then it will also sound a half tone higher, etc. But a part of it is also microtonal. And then I have a few extra keys that do special things. So for example, all the way on the left, there is a key that turns on and off the webcam that I showed you before. And then I have another key that plays the sample backwards instead of forwards when it's being pressed. And with that material, then it's quite easy to write a score that looks very silly. It looks pretty much like a Czerny piano etude or something. But what you see is not what you get. So each key, each pitch that you see on the score coincides with a specific sample, which is one of the funny but also strange things if you are studying this piece as a pianist, because you are actually, if you play it on your piano, you will hear strange melodies, but they have nothing to do with the final sound result. In the final sound results, you will hear all kinds of musical gestures. So this is a piece, for example, that I always tell performers that it makes no sense to, well, you can mechanically study it a little bit, but it actually, you should start with playing it with the software as soon as you can. Just one question before I go into the recording of this piece. Are there any people who already have heard this piece or seen it? No, great. Then I will just play the entire piece. It's not so long. Piano Hero 1 is about 9 minutes. It is actually part of a long cycle, which consists of 4 pieces, Piano Hero 1, 2, 3, 4. And the whole cycle lasts about an hour. It was performed at Warsaw Autumn 4 or 5 years ago, I think, with Stefan Ginsberg. And I can say more about the whole piece, which is modeled more or less after the Beethoven Hammerklavier Sonata. Also contains some references to it. The 3 of the 4 pieces have video in there, 1 doesn't. I will talk a little bit about the one that also doesn't have video. And there is also a narrative that goes over the entire cycle, but I'm not going to spend more time on that today. Probably the sound quality will be best if you, here I am. If you listen to it, I will send you a link in the chat window and you can just listen yourself. And I think the quality will be optimal then. So let me put this link there. It's a performance. There are quite a few performances online of this piece. A lot of them are really great. This one also is really great. It's Ernst Zürberg from the Ensemble Mosaic Ensemble in Berlin. And this is a recording we made some years ago. So I'll let you listen to it. Turn off your microphones are off already, so that's fine. And just give me a thumbs up or let me know in the chat window when you have finished. Did everybody finish? Yeah, great.
Yes.
Super.
Not yet.
Okay, I'll wait.
Okay, I also ended it.
Great. Are there any questions about this piece? Something you would, or thoughts you have, you want to share?
Maybe I have one question about this little fragment in the middle of the piece when we have no sounds, but just the sounds of the keyboard played without any sounds. Am I right if I think of it about like you wanted to show us to show the audience how it sounds, just this process of playing MIDI keyboard itself, or was there any extra idea about this?
Yeah, that's a good question. Perhaps I want to first ask the other people in the group if they had what their thoughts are on this question, or if they had any, how they made sense of this moment.
Proszę Państwa, odważnie, proszę się nie bać. Anybody?
I only see one person, so perhaps Maria, would you like to share a bit I mean, there is no wrong or right answer to this. I'm really genuinely curious how you made sense of that moment, because for me there are many interpretations, but I'm really curious how you made what you thought.
I don't know. I don't have an idea.
But when it happened, was it something? Well, yeah, you must have thought something like, "Oh, this is weird," or this, what's happening here? Or I'm really wondering. Anybody wants to share something there?
If I can tell something.
Yes, please.
I didn't think maybe about exactly a meaning of every I don't know, every part of this piece, but I started to think like there was a beginning what was really like there was a lot of things that were happening, and it was really it was making me that I really wanted to see it. It was really curious, and I was really curious what will be later. Beginning was really good, and middle it wasn't like beginning, but it was really, I don't mean like it wasn't good, but I think that parts of this piece was well done, because if the middle part of the piece was at the beginning, it would be not a good idea, but it was in the middle, and the slow part, like very dreaming, like I don't know, like there was not a lot of action. It was really good idea, and the end, it started be action again, and I like it. I really like it. The middle was a little bit about the thinking only, and feeling this like nothing, and I really like it.
Mm-hmm. Thanks so much for sharing those thoughts. What I perhaps can tell about this moment is this moment where the webcam is activated. So I originally wrote the piece and it was not there in the first version of the piece. I did not have that. And I felt that something was missing to the piece. It was too one-dimensional. It was too, once the piece starts, after a few minutes, you kind of understand what is going on, and it doesn't go away from this. It stays in this one world, in this one perspective. Literally also, because there is only, I told you in the beginning that I use a lot of cameras to record it from very different perspectives, but in Piano Hero 1, I use only one perspective. When I was composing, when I started composing, I really thought, okay, in Piano Hero 1, I will use all these different perspectives already and jump between it, like in a movie where you jump from one perspective to a far cut to a close up to etc. But then as I was working on it, I realized for a 9-10 minute piece, that's just way too much material. And then I realized, actually, I will write more pieces with this material. It really needs a long time to grow, to develop. So that's why there are 4 pieces in the end. So then I wrote Piano Hero 1, and there was only this one perspective. And again, like something was missing. It was too simple somehow, too one-dimensional. And I was thinking about it, and then one of the thoughts I had was, I want to change this perspective. Like literally, I want at some point in the piece to change the perspective, but I also want to, I wanted to open a door where you look, it's almost like looking into or in a car, like you look under the hood, you look into the machine. And one of the questions I think this piece raises or could raise is the question of avatar or of control, like who is controlling what? And also, what am I seeing? Am I looking at, first of all, when you see this live, you have to make a decision whether you look at the pianist or at the projection. You can kind of look at both at the same time, but you always choose. And so I wanted to complicate this a bit more. And I wanted to also make it possible to look at the projection, but actually see the pianist. And also have the feeling like, okay, suddenly, so the piece trains you in the beginning to think of this projection as this avatar that the pianist controls. But then suddenly what you see is not anymore this avatar, but it's actually the pianist. So I hoped that it would somehow raise the question also like, wait, who is controlling who now? Who is real? Who is an avatar? What am I seeing? And at the same time, since there is no sound, it's also like suddenly you're, I don't know if any of you have seen Being John Malkovich, the movie, but it's somehow like suddenly you're in the head of John Malkovich, or you're looking from the inside to what's happening. And then there is also the thing that it's not, you didn't see this in the recording because it was a studio recording, but when we do live performances of it, very often we try to have a little bit of light on the audience, and we try to position the webcam in such a way that you not only see the performer, but you also see the audience. So then it creates a really interesting mirror, because the people in the audience are suddenly not only looking at the pianist, but also at themselves. So it's kind of a mirror. And in that sense, then it also refers to the world of selfies, and we're constantly looking at ourselves through through a screen, through a medium. So those are all elements that I thought adding this one layer suddenly opens up a lot of different questions and makes it suddenly more dimensional. That was my hope, and that was why this is in there. Perhaps I can quickly, time is going relentlessly. Perhaps I can quickly talk about another piece, Generation Kill, and if I have a bit more time, I will try to talk also shortly about Third Space. Just to orient myself a little bit, does any of you know Generation Kill? Did any of you already see or? No? Okay, good. Then I'll talk about this. So, Generation Kill is also an older piece of mine. I'm mentioning it because it was a really important piece for me in many ways. And it also shows more of this, it's kind of a transition piece where the idea of a hybrid body is also expanded to the idea of hybrid spaces. So I wanted to create a piece where it becomes even more, where the question of virtuality, reality, like in Piano Hero 1, gets even more complicated, where it is even more difficult to understand what is real, what is virtual, and perhaps the categories real and virtual don't even make sense anymore. So a short background, when I composed this piece, we're talking about 2000, that was immediately after Piano Hero 1, so 2010, 2011, there were all these uprisings in the middle, well, in North Africa and then in the Middle East, the so-called Arabic Spring revolutions. And they started in Tunisia and then spread all over North Africa. And there are many things that are interesting about that period or that event or those events. One of them is that actually it's one of the first revolutions where social media were really the engine of the revolution, because people started to gather through Twitter, through Facebook, through YouTube videos. And the governments in many of these countries had a very firm hold on the press and on the media. So the press and the media couldn't really help, but internet and those social media apps really helped for people to gather and to protest. The other thing was that there were very often no journalists allowed in those countries, but people became their own journalists. So people were posting videos on YouTube, on social media of the revolutions, as you can see here. So there is the very important, like suddenly this object that we all have, our smartphone, becomes a weapon, and it suddenly becomes something very powerful. This is also a time where surveillance in many dimensions became exploded. Does anybody of you know who is the artist who made this, let's say, piece of art, by the way? What are you looking at? This any ideas? This is Banksy. Banksy, I don't know if you know him. He's a still famously anonymous artist, British artist, graffiti artist. I think this is a really fantastic example of art that changes the way we look at things, because we imagine that this text is not there. What are you looking at? It's not there. You just see a camera, and we don't even think about it anymore. There's a camera there on the wall, right? But then by just writing this and kind of letting the camera suddenly become visible, I think that's a brilliant thing with such simple tools. And that's kind of what I also wanted, in a way, one of the things I wanted to do in Piano Hero 1 with this moment where the camera is there. It's suddenly like, we're observing, we're actually looking at the person, and the person is being surveilled, being observed. So in that time, I found a survey where they calculated that in the UK, which at that point was the country that had the most surveillance cameras, there was one surveillance camera per 13 people. Of course, this is, I think, around 12, 13 years ago. This number has exploded by now, of course. So we are being observed. This is an image from a video that I found online back then of drone attacks by American drones, which are being operated in the US. And then on the other side of the planet, literally, they drop bombs or they annihilate the enemies, as they say. And there were some videos that you could find online that were posted by the American army. And at the same time, you could play computer games that looked like what I just, like this. And really, it's becoming almost impossible to notice the difference. So I thought those were all very interesting elements. There is a reality that you play like a game, where you're sitting in, as a military in the US, you're sitting in the Sierra Nevada, but you're killing people in Afghanistan or Pakistan. And then there is a game that you can play on your couch, which looks like reality. So there are many strange combinations of reality and virtuality that are kind of interfering with each other. And that's when I was writing this piece, Generation Kill. And those elements came together in that piece. Wait, sorry, I just pushed a wrong button here. So the setup is fairly simple. You have 4 musicians here, a cello, a percussion, an electric guitar, and a violin, facing the audience. The audience is sitting here on the bottom. Then you have 4 semi-transparent screens in front of them. And you have 4 musicians with the back to the audience who all have a game controller. And the game controller is controlling a laptop through a patch that was developed with a colleague of mine at Harvard, which runs, it runs on Macs, and it projects images of the same musician, pre-recorded images of the musician that are controlled with the game controller. And I will show you some images so you get an idea of what happens there. So as you can see here, what I didn't mention, something, or the reason why I use these semi-transparent screens is because it has a very interesting characteristic. When you project onto it, and there is no light behind the screen, you don't see what is behind the screen. You only see what is projected on the screen. If there is only light behind the screen, but no projection on the screen, it's like the screen doesn't exist. It's you almost don't see it. So you only see what's behind it. And then the interesting part is where you have both the light behind and the projection on top of the screen. And then you have these 2 layers, and it becomes very difficult to see what is real and what is not. So that's what the piece really plays with. What I didn't mention is, apart from the projection on the screen and the light behind the screen, there are also, for each couple of performers, there are webcams. So there's one webcam that each performer has in the laptop. We all have those. It's the webcam that I'm using now to talk to you. They can activate that one. but there's also a webcam behind the screen, which films the performers live. And they can also be recorded live and then stored in the computer and then played back. Apart from those images, all the other images of the performers were recorded in advance in the studio. And then also, again, like in Piano Hero 1, I cut them up in different parts and are controlled and triggered with the game controller. I'll show you in a second more about that. So this is a view from behind the screen. These are the game controllers. And yeah, this piece was made in 2012. Shows you how old I'm becoming. These were PlayStation 3 controllers. Back now, I think we are already at PlayStation 6 controllers, if I'm not wrong. But what we did was, it's not very difficult. It's actually quite simple to use the input of these controllers in Max. You just get streams of numbers that you have to assign to specific parameters. And then you can really use it as an instrument. And they're really interesting as instruments because you have a lot of parameters under your control with just this one object. It has gyroscopes, tilt sensors, not gyroscope. It has tilt sensors. So when you rotate along two axes, this information is stored. You have the buttons, they are touch sensitive. Then you have two joysticks, and you have more buttons under your thumbs. So there are a lot of things you can use to control any software. This is the user interface. You see that here there is the waveform of the video sample that is loaded, and then underneath is the selection, the part of the sample that the performers select. And then you can scroll through it. You can scrub through this audio and video file. You can play backwards. You can play. You can speed up. You can slow down. And these were all mapped with specific gestures. Oh yeah, you can also play the soundtrack of one video clip with the video of another one, etc. And then again, I made a score, which looks fairly normal. I just had to find a way to notate what the game controller people had to do. So in this score, it's probably quite small for you. I hope you can see anything. But it's always notated per couple. So for example, on top you have the cello and then the game controller 1. Then you have the percussion game controller 2, electric guitar game controller 3, violin game controller 4. And the game controller is notated on 3 staves. The upper staff is actually symbolizing whether the game controller moves upwards or downwards. That's the playback speed. The middle one is how big the sample is that I select from the video sample, and then how I move through it. So it's like a car wheel, actually. This movement makes you scroll through it. And then on the lower part, these are the buttons which decide which video you're playing back and which audio you're playing back. And then there are special buttons also to switch, for example, to the live webcams, etc. So everything has been notated. And then I'll play a quick, I'll play an extract from the piece. This is a studio recording. So we also, in the recording itself, played a little bit with these different perspectives. I'll show you another short extract from a bit further in the piece. The entire piece is about 22 minutes long. We don't have time for that now. But if you want to see the entire piece, you can find really great recordings online, also on YouTube. I'll play a little more here. So here you can see the webcams. Yes, there is a very important moment in the piece that I didn't show here, where, and it's a little bit comparable to the moment in Piano Hero where suddenly the webcam is activated. So here also you have the webcams that are used, but then there is kind of in the middle of the piece a moment where suddenly you see the images of a real drone attack of the US on the 4 screens. So you see 4 times a black and white drone attack without sound also. It's a long section. It's almost a minute and a half without sound. And this again is like this idea of suddenly showing the other side. Because what you see here could even, perhaps even it is somehow a bit funny. It's like people playing a game, and it looks a bit funny, but I also wanted to show that it's actually not just innocent, this world of controlling, a world of control basically, and the other side of the coin is where this control leads to death, and where there is a very disbalance between power, between control, between the people who are sitting in the Sierra Nevada in these containers, controlling the drones that then are killing people on the other side of the continent, very often also the wrong people. So yeah, again, a piece where these different perspectives are somehow presented. Yes, I'm gonna stop here. I'm so sorry, I didn't get to talk about Third Space, the piece that was performed that Anna saw in the festival, because time always goes too fast for me when I'm giving these presentations. So I also didn't get to talk about more recent music, unfortunately, but perhaps this is a good moment to give the microphone to you if you have more questions or thoughts or topics you want to talk about, or whatever. I'm here, available for you. I'd be more than happy to hear thoughts or try to answer questions.
Okay, so
questions?
if I
Okay.
can, I would like to ask, how much time did it take to program this second piece? Is it like weeks or more months? How much did it take you to program all of it and for performers to prepare?
Yeah. Excellent question. The entire piece took me a year to write. That's me. With that, I mean the entire process. So from programming to finishing the score, that was a year. I think 2/3 of that time, of that year, went into pre-compositional work. So developing the software, which again, I didn't program this myself. I worked with somebody who is a great programmer. For me, it would be too difficult. This was really heavy lifting. We worked on it together, but Josiah Oberholzer, he programmed the patch, and he's an excellent programmer. But it took months before we got to the final result. And in those months, we worked through many different prototypes, and I always tried at home to see how it works and what I want and what I don't like. And so we had this constant feedback. So that took quite a while. And then when I had a prototype that worked, there were many intermediate steps in this piece. So I had to record with the performers. By the way, the performers you saw, that's the Nadar ensemble. It's a Belgian ensemble that I co-direct. And so we had to make recordings of them that then, again, like in Piano Hero, I would look at, cut the material that I thought it was interesting. Then I would load those into the software and just try out things. And while working on that, so developing structure, developing ways of working with this material, because working with material like that is very different than working with a chord or working with just sound objects. This was much more multidimensional. So it really took me a lot of time to understand the material itself and to understand also how I can make a structure with this, a time structure, and what works, what doesn't work, what I need to do, what I can do, what I can't do. So that took a lot of time, a lot of CPU in my head. And I think only 1/3 of the time then I wrote the piece. So then at some point I started to develop structural ideas. When I already had mastered, when I became myself already fluent with the software and I could play it almost intuitively. So only then I started to develop structural ideas and sound ideas, and the piece then was written quite quickly. But the whole process was about a year, and I didn't work on any other compositions in that year. So it was really just this.
You were focused. Okay, thank you so much. And did that affect your later works? Like you used such prototypes or this kind of work later?
For sure. It affected my work a lot, but in many different ways, and perhaps also in some surprising ways. This was by far my most political piece, I would say, that I have written so far. It's especially with these very explicit drone images that you didn't see, but that are in the piece. And that opened up for me a really interesting, or a lot of questions. And I think a part of the power of the piece comes from there. But I also realized, for example, after this piece, that it also has, for me at least, there are some things that I don't know if you have this feeling as a composer that you write a piece and you're really happy with it, but then at some point you also realize, okay, but there are a few things that are not developed enough, or that I would do differently now, or that actually in an ideal world would be developed more. I had that feeling with this piece too. So it had its qualities, but I also felt like, okay, for example, sound-wise, there is something that I want to develop more. And also just because most of the time was invested in something else, and then only a small part of the time was really invested on working with the sound material. So that's something that influenced the music that came afterwards, because afterwards I thought, okay, I want to step back a little bit from the media aspect of it and again focus a bit more on sound. So several pieces that came after that were not using video or were much more, or were not that explicitly political. And what I'm not sure I could say that this piece influenced that, but it was I very often, when I work with technology, very often first want to understand what that technology does before I can write a piece about it. So it's not like I write an ensemble piece and then when it's finished, when the score is finished, I work on the electronics. It always goes hand in hand, and very often even comes before, because I first want to understand. It's like when you write for, I don't know, an oboe, you want to understand how the oboe works. So first you need to read books about the oboe, you perhaps go talk with an oboe player, and only then you write a score. So for me, it's the same with technology. If I, for example, with Piano Hero 1 or with Generation Kill, I first needed to understand how these tools work, how this new instrument works, and only then could I really write a piece for it. So that's an approach that I have also with instrumental music. I really first want to understand, expand the technique that I'm using or the sound world I'm using. So if I work, for example, with an electric guitar player, I first want to have or try all these effect pedals that the person has and then see how it sounds, what can I do with it? And almost always in that process, there are very interesting things that appear that I never would have thought of if I just have this distant connection with without the close interaction with the instrument. So that's not necessarily something that the piece has influenced, but it's just a similar approach I have when I work, let's say, purely sonical with sounds without video.
Okay, thank you so much.
Sure.
Okay, so maybe I would have another question. Maybe you could talk about for a few minutes about your recent interests. What are the pieces that you work on, and then maybe, for example, do you work with still with video and sound, or maybe it's much more work with sound, much more with electronic things? Maybe you switched recently to live instruments. How is it?
Yeah, thanks so much, Camille, for this question. So I realized by showing you these two pieces, you probably have a distorted image of my personality or my person as a composer. I really come from instrumental music. So my background is actually a pianist. When I was a child, I played the piano and I wanted to be a concert pianist. That was my young dream. Then life does things to you, and I studied engineering. And then after I studied engineering, I studied composition. And so, this use of technology kind of goes with the composition through the engineering also. It's kind of, it's a bit part of my world. But my instrumental background is still very strong, and I still love acoustic instruments. I also love to play myself, and I love to write for, let's say, just instruments as well. So I have been writing. I still every once in a while also make pieces with video, but I think I don't know, probably since 2016, my focus has been a bit more on sounds rather than video. But within this sound world, I most of the time work with electronics. And I have been very fascinated for a while already, actually already since, I don't know, 2008 or 9, but more so recently with feedback. So I'm working with feedback a lot in recent pieces. Very often And again, it's kind of this idea of hybrid instruments. I can quickly, I actually prepared the slides on that. I will quickly show you a slide so you have an idea. Boom, boom, boom. Let's do this more professionally. Yes, okay. There, you should see, this is Bettina Junge, the flute player and former artistic director of the ensemble Mosaic, who unfortunately died only a few months ago, much too young. But as you can see, so she plays the flute, and I wrote a piece for Ensemble Mosaic for trio. It's called Inhibition Space 1 for 3 woodwind instruments. And the woodwind instruments all they are hybridized, or they are expanded through a small microphone inside the instrument, which is really, it goes quite deep in the instrument. And they all have an individual loudspeaker standing next to them. And there is a feedback loop between the microphone inside the instrument and the loudspeaker next to them. And actually, to make it a bit more interesting also, there is a patch that stands in between the microphone and the speaker. So there's a software that adds effects to it so that you can expand the feedback a bit more. And well, as you know, feedback is notoriously uncontrollable. If you have a microphone and you just put it too close to a loudspeaker, you get immediately this feedback. But the interesting thing is if you do this with instruments that have a resonating chamber, let's say, of which you can change the properties, in this case by opening or closing keys, for example, or by blowing while playing, or moving the distance between the microphone and the loudspeaker, you can really control the feedback quite well. And apart from that, they also have pedals, as you can see. So there's the microphone, the loudspeaker, and then they have pedals with which they control effects on the feedback. And with that very simple idea, I've been working a lot. There is a cycle, an ongoing cycle, which is called Inhibition Space. There are right now 3 pieces in that cycle, but there will be more. You can find, except for the third one, you can find recordings online of Inhibition Space 1 and 2. Also a video recording, which shows you a bit more how it also really works physically. And then there's a big project I did a few years ago where this idea was expanded a lot, and where I wrote a piece of almost 50 minutes where there are 4 acoustic quartets in a room, in a big concert space. And then there are 6 of these feedback soloists, and the audience is sitting in the middle. And with that, I created a big piece, which is called Inhabit Inhibits. There is a very nice video recording also online of this piece. And yeah, so I also wrote an electric guitar concerto a few years ago, and I will write a new orchestra piece in a few years. So my focus has been a bit more on the sound these years, although there were a few pieces with video as well. But yeah, I think it always goes in waves with me. So probably at some point I will get tired again, or will have the feeling that, okay, with sound I have developed. Now there's, again, I want to develop this visual element a bit more. It fluctuates.
Okay, thank you so much. It's really interesting, and I don't know about how about the rest, but for me it was really inspiring. Especially this first piece, which is for me it's really inspiring to work with sample, to work with electronic. Really great idea and great performance, of course.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, I guess, I don't know, unless there is one more question, which I would be happy to answer. Last chance.
Okay, probably we have no more questions for now. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thanks for being here and for organizing this.
Our pleasure, and I'm also sure that we will, I at least will play some your music on YouTube when we will, end this meeting, because I'm really curious about another pieces, another compositions.
That's great. Thanks so much. Yes, if I can make just a short publicity. There is a new CD that just released a month ago, which has several of these pieces with feedback that I talked about, and also the electric guitar concerto. You can hear it actually, of course you can buy it, but you can also hear the pieces on Bandcamp. If you go to my website, you find the link, and then you can hear the pieces as well.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, and nice meeting you all.
Very nice to meet you, and it was very, very inspiring for us. Thank you, and
I'm very happy about that.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.